Hello, this is NCN News Extended. I am Leron Brummel. Thanks for joining us. Today we're talking quite a number of hot topics with the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Anil Nandlall. A number of things on the agenda, of course, the Ponzi scheme that is taking up a lot of space. We're also talking about the investigation into GECOM, and we're going to be talking about stricter measures for COVID-19 guidelines to ensure that we keep the numbers low. AG, thanks very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and good day to your listeners and viewers across Guyana.
The last time we had a chat, we ran out of time.
I know.
And we still don't have time to talk about all of that right now, but there are a number of pressing issues. Let's start to talk about first the Accelerated Capital Firm Incorporated, which is involved in this Ponzi scheme in Guyana. What's the latest there?
Well, Leroy, there have been a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation in the public domain. And perhaps it's convenient that I start from the government's involvement at the commencement. While we were in opposition, we received multiple complaints from citizens across this land that there is this financial scheme of some sort being operated somewhere on the east coast of Demerara. And as the election saga was ongoing during that 5 months period, the complaints intensified. More and more persons were coming forward to say that they are not getting the promised reward from their quote-unquote investments. And so when we got into government, a number of persons came to us as well. And then the government made enquiries of the various important and relevant sectors in the financial apparatus to inquire about the operations of this scheme. And then we realized the magnitude that tens of thousands of persons have quote-unquote invested in this scheme. The president assembled a multitask or a multi-sector task force, so to speak, headed by myself. It included the Bank of Guyana, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the Guyana Police Force, and the Guyana Securities Council. And the team came together and we started to learn about the operations of this unit. It was being operated 3 years hence, and the Guyana Securities Council has a series of documents that they issued, public advisories informing the public about the dangers of this entity, that it was not registered, that it was not licensed, that it was operated, it was being operated without any regulation whatsoever. And it was receiving millions and millions of dollars. That was during the previous administration. All those appeals fell on deaf ears. There is evidence in writing that letters were sent to Kemraj Ramjatan and to Winston Felix in their respective capacities as ministers of the government. One line of letters were in relation to an advertisement placed in the newspapers informing the public of a naturalization application filed by Mr. Yuri Dominguez, one of the two principals in this scheme. Mr. Felix, I saw, came out denying that such a letter was sent to him. The letter was sent from the Security Council as a result of that naturalization advertisement or notification. And Mr. Felix was informed of what the Guyana Securities Council had in their possession in relation to this gentleman. And I believe the letter advised against the grant of citizenship. Notwithstanding, the citizenship status was conferred, and the gentleman is now a citizen of Guyana, being issued with a 2020 passport. And when we began to examine the apparatus, the Bank of Guyana, for example, did their own investigations and was able to establish, and a public statement was made, that neither the company nor its principals have any bank accounts in the commercial sector, in the banking sector. They were bank accounts and they were closed earlier this year.
So the money was not going in.
Then the Bank of Guyana also did an examination of the movement in the accounts from the time they were open to the time that they were closed. And there were negligible balances in these accounts, excepting one account at one commercial bank that showed that there was some activity to the tune of about $20 million, Guyana dollars.
Okay.
But that is simply a drop of water in the ocean when one compares with the magnitude of the monies that were involved. As a result, the two principals were taken into custody by the police. And they have given the police a series of information. They told the police that they have counterparts companies in various countries. They have bank accounts in these countries. And of course, the police passed the information on to the central bank, to Interpol, to the FIU, and queries were made through these different agencies to those countries that were named as countries that had monies for this company. None of the companies, none of the countries identified or the companies identified had no relationship with this company. That's the first thing. And in terms of bank accounts, there were no bank accounts. Sometimes there were no bank accounts. Yes, I think that was it. There were no bank accounts. So you couldn't even go to the second stage of inquiring how much money is in the bank account. So the big question is, how did this huge sum of money or sums of money that would have been received in Guyana, how did it leave Guyana? No one can answer that question. No one. They give countries like Belize, United States of America, Nevada in particular, Greece, Germany. All these countries, checks were done, and they did not unearth anything. So it is a huge financial scam. The police force had to enlist the help of experts in computer technology and experts in financial investigation. And they were able to get into the computer system of these people and were able to see documents that were deleted but were able to be recovered through the expertise of these individuals. And they show hundreds of millions of dollars received, and no one can say where the monies have gone. And I see people protesting against the government. Now, this is a Ponzi scheme. It is a fraud. The fact that so many people were allowed to be ensnared into the arms of this fraud was due to the neglect of the previous government. We could have sat idly by and allowed more people to invest in the scheme. You know how the scheme works? The last person that brings in money, that money trickles down to pay the first investor. And that is how it's a pyramid. It's built one stage after another. That is how it is built. With no money in it really from the person who owns the operation. You must know of the example of Bernie Madoff.
When he made off Stanford 2020.
Bernie Madoff took away 80 billion United States dollars in his scam and did not own a single asset. Stanford, he had over 20 billion United States dollars and really had owned nothing. Police have done checks and the other agencies have done checks. These people own nothing in Guyana. Not even a vehicle, not even a property. And of course they want bail. Fortunately, I see a magistrate has remanded
them.
Both of them to prison. The moment they are granted bail, in my respectful view, I'm not the investigator, but my experiences and from what I have seen, based upon reports that are coming to this task force from the various agencies, from the moment that bail is granted, those two individuals will flee this country. And those very people who are now abusing and criticizing the government will turn to the government for help. The truth of the matter is that it is difficult for them to accept that they have been conned. So they are appealing to us out there, give the man an opportunity to get out of custody so that he can get the money.
AG, in your estimation, do you think, and let me rephrase that, the question everyone wants to know, if it is that these are the steps that are being taken, how are they going to recover their monies? And government is involved. How are we going to recover the monies to give to these persons who say that they have not gotten back anything on their investment?
Well, up at this point in time, I really can't answer that question because the money cannot be found. Now they are saying that if the man is allowed to go get out of custody, the money will magically appear. How? The police have given the man his computer. The police have given to him the internet. The police have given to him his phone. The central bank has agreed to open an account or to allow him to open an account in the commercial bank. So the same way that he sent the money out of the country, he used the apparatus of a computer apparently on his cell phone. Let the money come back through the same route. There is nothing that he can do outside of the precincts of the lockups that he cannot do inside the lockup.
With these facilities provided.
With these facilities provided. So it is a sham. It is a scam. It is a fraud. And the man has a whole host of very influential people whom he has enmeshed in this conspiracy.
Are these the people who
religious leaders of standing, pandits, priests, right across this country? They took their entire congregation to this man. And that is the problem. Where do you get back the money? I don't know.
Has there been a figure based on the investigations that would have happened of how much money would have been invested into this scheme by persons across this
country?
country?
Over 20 million US
dollars. And
a lot of the information has been deleted from the computer system. Now, what kind of character would want to do that? How? Just take common sense. How can money generate an interest rate of 50%? at a short period of a month or 2 months. How? Which economic activity on planet Earth can yield that kind of reward? I don't know of any. Even if one, I don't know. Even if you do, if you sell, I don't know what is the most profitable business around. It is going to be illegal, but even if you do those illegal drugs business that you read that yields so much money, I don't think can yield a 50% reward. So it has to be a scam.
AG, from all these people who have been scammed in this Ponzi scheme, those who are protesting against the arrest of and those who came with complaints, is there going to be a consultation? When I say a consultation, a meeting, and I know we're operating under COVID guidelines, to say these are the next steps, this is what the government wants to do, because this brings back memories of CLECO, near at home just a few years ago, in these monies being invested and persons not being able to get their monies back.
Well, at this stage, we are at the investigation component of the process. At some stage, it will have to go beyond that. Government will have to determine how, if it wants to get involved beyond that. This has nothing to do with government. This is a con man who was able to successfully con thousands of people. And when the government's only, well, not only, the government's major priority here is to get back the money to give back to people as far as possible. And then the secondary consideration would be to close down the operation, obviously, and to charge the man with whatever offenses he may have committed,
so for the purpose
based upon the investigations.
But
now the focus is to get the money to pay back the people who have been defrauded. We have asked, the police have issued statements, and we have issued public statements inviting persons to go to the police. Persons are afraid to go to the police because they are now worried that they may be charged in a conspiracy. Remember, a lot of these people, this scheme is structured in such a way that you invest and then you get your interest based upon that investment. And if you bring someone else, you get an additional fee for that, and I think you become an investor after that. So it's a self-implicatory kind of arrangement.
So how do you get persons to come forward now to give this information? Is it that you're saying...
Well, I'm speaking to them now.
Hey,
through this medium.
Because now that you've mentioned that they may be afraid to come, that they will be charged for having to invest and bring persons.
We have said that the ordinary Guyanese who is a victim, of course, will not be charged. But there are certain players at certain levels whom I can't say whether they would be charged. They would not be charged. That's a matter for the police. But I know that apart from the two principals, such an operation could not have been managed and grown to the extent that it has grown with these two people alone. There were other central figures who brought persons in droves to invest in this operation. That many prominent businessmen, big businessmen in this country, have also invested their money there. And they have different considerations that they are worried about, and as a result are not prepared to come forward. But the simple truth is, if you don't put your name down with the police, and whatever money is recovered, you will not be able to benefit from it. Because I don't know of what other system. These two people who are in police custody, I don't know there must be, I'm just thinking aloud, there must be a huge sum of money deposited somewhere in Guyana. When I say deposited, I don't mean in a bank,
In a
because
bank account.
unless it's in someone else's name. But there has to be a huge sum of money somewhere hidden in Guyana that we are hoping that they will bring out at some point in time.
AG, all that we've spoken about now begs the question of future regulation. And is there going to be an across-the-board investigation now to see if there are any more such schemes set up in Ghana? And what does your office intend to do going forward?
Well, that's a good question, because both the central bank and the Financial Intelligence Unit seem to have evidence that there are other smaller operations ongoing. The law's framework is there. There is a legal framework for them to come in and register. And in all fairness, this company did make an application, but they could not have satisfied the requirements. They failed the due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
They do not qualify in any way for the license that they were applying for. They don't have the start-out capital, or at least they didn't produce it to the agency to which they made the application. And as a result, their application cannot be processed. And they only made that application in the month of August. That was when we get into government. And that was also one of the triggering things, because they were now trying to get into the system for the first time. So that is one tragedy that government is working on in terms of addressing. And I make this plea to people out there. The government is not acting against your interest. You know, I can advise the government, or the president can make a decision tomorrow that, you know, we just leave this thing alone. But you can't. You are the government of the country. How can you have an operation of that magnitude, operating without a license, contrary to law, and you do not get involved? I don't understand. A government can't turn a blind eye to that kind of operation. What these people don't understand is that if this government did not intervene, this thing was growing bigger and bigger, and at some point in time, they would have gone. The principals would have fled one day, and nobody would have understood what happened. Nobody would have understood what happened.
Fair enough, AG.
So that investigation is ongoing, and hopefully we start to see light somewhere at the end of the tunnel, because we have not been seeing anything encouraging at all. Every piece of information that has been given to the police, when they explore it, it turns out to be false.
At that end.
Look, let me just give you a simple example. In his oral questioning, when the police was interrogating one of the principals, he said that the money is in a company called FK or FC, I can't remember. And that is what he said orally. So the police, and this company is in Belize. So the police passed that information on, and it was investigated in Belize. No such company was found to exist in Belize. Obviously recognizing that will be the result of the inquiry in Belize, the company then issues a statement and changes the letter around from the name that they give to the police orally to KC or something like that. The letters were changed. That is the kind of finesse and sophistry that you're dealing with. But that company also was checked out. And there was no such company like that either. And then there is a whole long story about, oh, the money now is in some Bitcoin account, and I don't.
That was the next question I was going to ask
Yes.
about, whether they're transferring with this Bitcoin, because Bitcoins, you can get that now, you can score high, and then tomorrow you lose everything.
Well, as I said, there is a financial investigator, highly trained, a highly professional person who understands all these fiscal intricacies
Money movements.
and movement of money, and he's advising the police. And I suppose if the police needs more assistance, the police will request more assistance.
That's one whole big thing that we're talking about. AG, could we move on from here?
Yes, of
We've got
course.
so many other issues to talk about. Investigation into GECOM. Just on Thursday, President Irfanali, Dr. Irfanali, swore in Attorney at Law Manoj Narayan on the GECOM to replace Minister Ben. Congratulations to him on that, taking up that post. The investigation into GECOM is what we want to know. The discussion we had on the day of inauguration when you spoke with the media was, you have to decide on what avenue to take to go this investigation. What is the course of action?
Well, the government, again, while we were in opposition, we made a promise to the local as well as the international community that a thorough investigation will be done into the activities which ensued the March 2nd regional and national elections. And the president, in his inaugural address, reiterated that promise. So the police force, a report was made, and recall that private criminal charges were already filed, and reports were made to the police, and the state apparatus indicated that they will take over those criminal charges, and the police indicated that based upon the reports that it received, it will begin the investigation. That should come as no surprise to anyone. For anyone to think that our government would not have launched the investigation or activate the investigative arm of the state in relation to the happenings of GECOM must be mad. Must be mad. Every one of our ministers, every one of our leaders committed to that. That investigation is ongoing. There are now, I believe, over 5 persons working in the GECOM Secretariat who are assisting the police with their investigations. I know that Mr. Mingo is in custody, the returning officer for Region 4. I know that his lawyer has made an application for habeas corpus in the High Court, and that application for habeas corpus was heard this morning by Justice Rishi Prasad, who is performing the functions of Chief Justice. Justice Roxanne George Wilshire is on vacation. And we had a long hearing of the habeas corpus application this morning. The press was invited virtually. I understand 2 press persons were there. And after hearing, I appeared in person, the Attorney General, along with the Solicitor General, the Deputy Solicitor General, and another state counsel, and the DPP was also represented by a state counsel attached to her department, and there was a police inspector as well who participated in the hearing. Mr. Darren Wade appeared for Mr. Mingo, and after hearing detailed legal arguments from me, the judge advised Mr. Wade to withdraw the proceedings because I argue that it is premature, and I gave the judge the legal arguments as to why it is premature and should not have been filed in the first place. And even if it was not premature, when one examines the application itself, it suffers from multiple legal deficiencies, all of which I identified to the judge. In the end, the court advised Mr. Wade to withdraw the application of habeas corpus. So that is withdrawn. So Mr. Mingo remains in custody and will continue to assist the police with their investigations. You saw Mr. Narayan being sworn in and appointed and sworn in as a replacement for the government on the commission, replacing Mr. Robson Ben, who was appointed Minister of Home Affairs. And it is important, as I said at the swearing-in ceremony, that GECOM be constituted fully and quickly, because at this point in time, the important activity in which GECOM is engaged is to facilitate the investigations, the audits, and the other forms of inquiries which are likely to be launched in the near future. You have persons at GECOM there who are the subject of investigation or are the subject of some component of the investigations, and they are still in the organization. One of them has a criminal charge, and he's still functioning in that capacity. That can't continue. That's not how things are done. Investigations, when they are ongoing, must be allowed to be executed fully, and those who are in the agency that is the subject of the investigation are duty bound to assist with those investigations. Unfortunately, there are persons there in the Secretariat who are, well, based upon the police report, who are, not necessarily cooperative with the investigations. So GECOM is an independent body, and GECOM must, I believe, understand that they are run by taxpayers' dollars. And just like how every component of government, executive government, is subject to scrutiny and public examination, GECOM is not accepted or exempted. And GECOM, therefore, must open up its process for public scrutiny and examination by the other relevant agencies of state, the Auditor General, the Guyana Police Force, etc. That is part of its process. If GECOM appears to be undemocratic in its functioning and is not transparent and accountable, then how can we get democracy from GECOM? Meaning, if GECOM itself is undemocratic, it can't hold democratic elections.
Is there a time frame, a window period for when this investigation into GECOM will take, or that is open-ended at this point?
No, that is a matter for the investigators, but the president has said that no stone must be left unturned. So, as elaborate as possible. You see, Leroy, all of us as Guyanese are entitled to know what happened during those 5 months period, where our country was pushed to the brink, pushed to the edge of that precipice, could have gone over the abyss and could have self-destruct. I want to know that as a citizen. And I'm sure many thousands of your viewers would like to know that. What transpired? Why? And who are the intellectual authors, if there are intellectual authors? These are things that we as a country and as a people must clearly investigate, bring to the fore, and condignly deal with, so that we rectify the injustices done, but most importantly, we ensure that it does not reoccur. So we put mechanisms, systems, and laws in place to ensure that nothing close to that can ever happen again. And I don't think any Guyanese, whether you are on one side of the political divide or another side of the political divide, I don't think any Guyanese would like to see what happened in those 5 years ever happen again. If you want to see that happen again, then you do not love this country. You don't. Every Guyanese who has some degree of respect and love for Guyana must have a feeling about what happened there, and must have a feeling, must believe that what happened there must never again happen. Whether you're a PNC, whether you're a APNU, whether you're a PPP, whether you're a ANUG, I don't think anybody wants to see a reoccurrence of that 5 months period. And therefore, we need to put closure on that. We need to understand what happened and ensure that we safeguard the future against its reoccurrence.
Understandable, AG. AG, we're moving on. We're talking about regulations and laws all the time. We're talking COVID now, which is a major problem. Enforcement comes into play because people are flouting the guidelines that are there, and you've got these fines that are really a literal slap on the wrist to go away.
Well,
what happens now?
I think in every public engagement the president has had, he has emphasized that COVID remains one of Guyana's priority, if not our most significant priority. The Ministry of Health and a whole task force have been charged with that responsibility. The Attorney General Chambers plays a role, and we have a pandemic of gigantic proportions on our hands that unfortunately is spiraling and getting bigger. Hopefully it has not reached the stage where it is beyond our control. But unless it is harnessed, unless it is taken a grip of, it can quickly reach there, and we can move swiftly into a disaster zone in this country. From all indications, we don't have the medical capabilities to take care of the number of persons that can fall sick anytime and require intensive medical care. We don't have that capacity. We are speaking, therefore, of a horrible disaster, a disaster that none of us would ever want to take place in our country. And this, of course, has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with a national pandemic. This has to do with our public health as a people and as a country, as a society. We are under threat. The entire country is under threat. Now we have put out measures there, and those measures, unfortunately, have not yielded the success that one expected them to yield. And we did say that all these measures are transient and are temporary, and they will be modified, either upwards or downwards, depending on how the pandemic manifests itself. it is becoming more pronounced in most of the regions, while it is declining in, for example, Region 8. It is skyrocketing in Region 4 and Region 6, our two most populous regions. And therefore, we have a serious problem. We know that laws are never the solution, are only part of the solution. And there is no one solution here. There is no one solution. Medically, you simply can't address the volume of cases that are multiplying every day. But we have to cope with that. So in terms of the government is pursuing every avenue available to get more medical supplies into the country, more test kits, more masks, more everything else needed to medically engage. Then on the other hand, we have we are consulting every day with different sectors of the country, because a lot of people do not want a total lockdown. But the situation is getting worse. And I don't know whether we have reached this stage yet of a total lockdown, but we are certainly not far from it. And people have to understand. People have to understand. Certainly, the current guidelines have to be reviewed, and quickly, to make them more harsher, to make them more punitive, to make them more rigid. And then we also have to have the enforcement component. It makes make no sense that we put guidelines out and regulations out and we do not enforce them. So masks wearing must be mandatory, and the fines that now attach to violation of the guidelines will certainly have to be reviewed so that they become more punitive. Currently, the fine is $3,000. That has not had any impact whatsoever. So you have to make it higher. And you have to involve both the occupier and the occupants of a premises. So let us say you have a business and you are opening within the hours permitted, and there is a person there without a mask. We charge the proprietor and the occupier of the premises, or the customer, or the patron, as the case may be. And then we have to relook at the guidelines, the opening measures, because, I mean, we tried, because the business community suffering terribly. This sickness, this pandemic is hitting you from every sector, from every conceivable angle. You can't do physical exercise, you can't earn, you can't work, and then you get sick. It's extraordinarily difficult to function in that kind of dynamics. So we have to adjust back, or adjust those measures all over again, to tighten them, to make them more coercive and more punitive, with the view of getting greater compliance. If not, then we will have no other choice but to go into a complete lockdown. I hate to paint such dismal picture, but that is the reality as I understand it, from the health people and from my own perception as a citizen of Guyana living in this society.
We know these measures last until the 31st of August. There's a national task force. So we to expect the next time the national task force speaks, these measures are going to be in place? Or it takes some time?
This
going back to front?
afternoon, there is a meeting to begin the review so that by the 31st, there is a smooth transition into the new guidelines. So this afternoon, the work will begin. Today's what date?
Today is the 28th.
The 28th. So it's this weekend we're speaking about. So we don't have much time. But I know I spoke to the Minister of Health this morning, and I know that he is scheduling a meeting for later this afternoon, where I may have to attend, or persons from the Ministry of Legal Affairs.
Strong measures have to be put in place. Strong measures are coming. Closing statements on this COVID pandemic. I know the health minister appealed only on Thursday night for persons to, one, stop prank calling the COVID hotline. And even that, those measures are supposed to be reviewed. Well,
you know, I hope that we are a mature people. I hope that we are an educated people. I know that we are an educated people. I know that we are an intelligent people. So no one should have any difficulty in persuading the public of how serious COVID is and how serious the COVID situation is in Guyana. COVID is lethal, and the situation here is bordering on pandemonium. That's where we are now. And therefore, it is self-preservation. It's as simple as that. You can possibly die, very likely die, not a remote possibility, very likely die if you are not careful and you don't comply with the guidelines that the state is putting out, all to advance your better health welfare. I don't think that I should be going out expending great amount of energy. If you don't comply, you will die. It's as simple as that. So I think that the message sells itself.
It's a very grim message to send, but it's the reality of what we're dealing with, not only in Ghana, but across the world. Minister of Legal Affairs and Attorney General Anil Nandlall, thanks very much for coming and chatting with us. We're going to hear more from you, of course, as soon as these measures are implemented. Of course, we'll hear what those stiffer penalties are likely to be.
Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate it. This has been a special production, NCN News Extended. We'll bring you more details as they become available on all matters of national interest here on NCN. Do have a good one.